Firstly, I would like to thank Sydney and his team for affording me this opportunity to speak at this conference or this summit. My name is Kobus Greiling. You can find me at kobusgreiling.me. And I'm a conversational AI and chatbot analyst and previously product owner of Vodacom Toby VoiceBot. Today, I would like to briefly present 15 key elements or 15 conversational AI trends from the Gartner and IDC leaders, and just looking what are the 15 things the Gartner and IDC leaders are doing, what elements are tying them together in order to create amazing conversational experiences. But perhaps just by way of introduction, just a layout of where we are currently, the state of conversational AI and chatbots and voicebots currently, and where we want to go. So on the left, you can see there the menu and click-driven chatbot. So you can create a conversational agent in Facebook Messenger without any NLU. Then we went into the 4 pillars of chatbot architecture. It was very rigid. We've got intents and entities, rigid dialogue state management, and then we also have got the bot messages that's embedded within the conversational dialogue. And then we have we're moving currently into intent-driven development. That's something that Human First is doing, where you drive development based on intents or clusterings you detect from user input. And also RASA is pioneering conversational driven development and design, and it's the whole idea of having flexible intents and entities that adjust as your conversations from the users change. And then we want to move into flexible and adaptable dialogue state machines. And again, thinking of RASA in terms of their machine learning stories, to have a state machine, a conversational dialogue management that's less rigid and more flexible and more adaptable to the conversation. And then we really want to move into natural language generation, where the dialogue and the bot responses is really generated on the fly. And I mean, OpenAI really finds them in a league of their own with their language API, where you can, with zero-shot or few-shot training, have a chatbot you can have a full-on conversation with. State is managed, natural language is generated, that's really fluent and succinct and exceptional. The challenge here is that on the one side you want flexibility, but on the other side you also want control. So something like OpenAI's language API gives you the ultimate flexibility, and you can have a very good and natural conversation, but the fine-tuning and the control is not there for an enterprise implementation. And on the other side, if you only have control and you have a rigid state machine with no flexibility, it's hard to have a natural conversation where the user can digress, where there's digression, where there's disambiguation, where there are follow-up questions, and the like. So the challenge with conversational AI is really to balance flexibility and control and find a very good mix of those two. So there are products that's got ultimate flexibility, but really fine-tuning and control is not yet there. And then there are other products where they have ultimate control, but you want some flexibility you want to introduce some flexibility into the conversation. Horizontally, click button navigation, perhaps move to keyword recognition, where we try and find key themes or key phrases. And really currently we find ourselves with structured intent and entity matching, and we want to move into unrestricted compound natural language. On the right, you'll see that the in-domain conversational affordances will grow. So obviously there's huge focus on cost saving and building conversational agents that's really focused on a specific organization, a specific set of products and services, very domain focused. And as the developers and designers focus on that specific domain, you want to give them conversational affordances, tools, knobs, levers they can use to build and tweak this conversation. So we want to move away from a messaging bot into a truly conversational interface. Obviously, the tools need to be there, and the tools are developing at a rapid pace, and there's also very much innovation is going into the tools and affordances that's available to us. Adoption will always lag behind the available tools, especially with bigger organizations, especially if a company doesn't have an appetite for taking risk or being a first user or a first mover. I think that the areas where companies really, where chatbot companies really help with the adoption of tools is having their platform as software as a service. So it's a cloud solution. There's no local install needed. I think the second area, and this is where core AI and Cognigy is really leading the way, and also Rasa is where you've got free access. So recently core AI and Cognigy just gave free access. All you need is an email address, you can register, and you've got full access to their suite of products and the whole platform. So that really helps with adoption. There's no local install. You've got an internet connection, you've got an email address, you can access the software, start playing with it. And then I think also to mention is in terms of the pricing model. So some of these organizations are moving to a per session pricing model. It's not a big capital outlay, so it's really easy to start your bot on a very small scale, and if it's successful, you can scale it from there. And currently, we're finding ourselves in more structured intent and entity matching, perhaps still in the messaging bot era. But there's definitely a scope for us to grow. Recently there's been lots of comment on everything is happening, but also nothing is happening within the conversational AI space. And the question has been asked, where are all the good bots? But I think there are quite a few good implementations in terms of conversational AI, and especially when it comes to voice bots. So the real cost saving lies with the automation of calls to the call center. So I would say the appetite for larger organizations and enterprises are not really to introduce another digital channel, an additional one, but to automate and service the current one. So typically the brick and mortar organizations still rely heavily on call center activity, people calling into the call center, and a way to remedy that would be to automate those call center calls. And there's a big need for voice bots, people accessing voice bots not via a dedicated device like Google Home or Alexa, but accessing the voice bot via a normal phone call, placing a call and speaking to the bot. And we're seeing that really works well, and that's a whole different discussion. Right, so let's dive into the 15 key takeaways, 15 areas where these leaders all converge on. The first one is they're building structure into intents. So intents are being fortified or augmented, whatever you want to call it, definitely not being deprecated. So we are seeing with intents, has got a hierarchy. So there are we're seeing the use of main intents and then subsequent sub intents, and also the idea of nested intents. So I think Cognigy allows 3 levels of nesting. Human first allows for all intents and purposes unrestricted nested intents. So that gives another dimension to intent. So there's no need to only expand your intents horizontally and then introduce a new intent for every deviation or every specific case, but you can order your intents almost like a vector, where you've got also a vertical element to your intents, having nested or sub intents. We're also seeing that managing intents is being introduced. So intents can be switched on and off. Weights can be added to different intents. Thresholds are being set within the intents for relevance. A threshold can be set for a disambiguation question on an intent. So if an intent's confidence isn't high enough, then a question can be asked to disambiguate on that specific intent. Something Core AI introduced is also sub-patterns within intents, sub-intents, and also follow-up intents. So we're seeing that the whole idea of a single list of intents, a straight-laced approach of user utterance being matched to a specific intent, and then those intents being mapped to elements or nodes within a dialogue flow, that's really falling away. And we're seeing very feature-rich intents and intents that can be managed in a very flexible way. Secondly, specific intents are being linked to specific flows, and intents and entities are also specifically linked. So we're seeing this close coupling of, we don't have a set of intents and entities and the call flow, but we're really seeing this coupling of certain intents with certain entities with a specific portion of the flow. So that there's a very strong association. So it's not an idea where all the intents are set up and could match any of the entities in any part of the call flow, but it's really this creating these clusters within the larger bot or the bot skill, and these clusters consist of a portion of the skill a portion of the dialogue, a portion of the entities, a portion of the intents, and that's being linked together. And that makes sense because quite often, you know, certain intents are always matched with certain entities, and those intents and entities often goes to only a certain portion in the call flow. Thirdly, intents can be dragged, dropped, nested, unnested. That's a nice feature also of Human First, where intents are really flexible. So you can split intents up by visually dragging them. You can merge intents by dropping them into each other, and you can break a specific intent up into sub-intents also by just splitting up and dragging them. Fourthly, there are currently 4 distinct approaches to dialogue state management and development, but what we currently see is a proliferation of the design canvas approach. There are a few approaches. The one is just a pro code approach, where perhaps in the case of Microsoft Bot framework, where you can write the dialogue state machine in C#. Then there's also an approach of having a state machine, where you just have the different states you drag and drop. There's also then the idea of a full-on design canvas where it's fully interactive. You have your conversational nodes or your flow nodes, and you can drag and drop these and connect them and map out the whole conversation. And then from there also incorporate your NLU portions. We're also seeing that the elements being introduced are digression. So digression is a normal part of human conversation, and we're seeing digression being implemented and catered for in the call flow. Disambiguation is quite big, where when the confidence is not there, then the user is given the option to disambiguate. What's also neat about disambiguation is you can establish themes. And I think that's also something Core AI alludes to in their design, is that when there is a utterance from the user that is not specifically related to a intent, then you can create themes, right? So a theme is just a collection of intents you want to present to the user, and the user can then disambiguate from there. We're seeing multimodality, speech, text input, and graphic design affordances. So one can, there's probably a pro code approach, a low code, and a no code, and we're seeing that there's focus on low code to no code, and there's definitely focus on voice bot integration. So there's a deep need and a big need for organizations to voice enable their conversational agents. Number 5, the idea of maintaining context across intents and different sections of the dialogue flow That's very important, and especially when introducing FAQs within the flow. So, often someone would be busy making a booking, hotel reservation, and then they would ask a question while they're booking. And so the whole idea of maintaining context to break out of the booking routine, go to FAQ, answer the question, and then dive back into the booking. So we're seeing quite a few of the solutions are starting to implement in a very clever way the idea and the notion for users to be able to digress, ask a question, and then come back. Perhaps they're busy booking a flight, and they ask about the weather in their destination city, and then the bot is able to give the weather in the destination city, and then loop back to the whole process of booking the flight, and then still have the context, of that conversation. Number 6, software as a service. Most of the frameworks do have local private cloud install options. Should an organization want that, especially for latency and for privacy of personal information legislation, but software as a service, you log in and the service is available. Number 7, annotation is becoming very big. Intense compound entities can be defined. Again, structure in the entities and the intents. So we're really seeing that lots of flexibility in the NLU window where text can be annotated and detail added to it. Number 8, script or chatbot dialogue prompt management is improving. So we're seeing with some solutions, especially Nuance Mix, also Microsoft Bot Composer, where the script is not embedded within the dialog flow, but the script or the bot messaging can actually be extracted in this abstraction layer where those messages can be managed. Number 9, ease of use, really non-technical end-to-end approach. There are some really technical environments, probably like Deprecate, MindMelts, more technical, NVIDIA, Riva, more technical. Rasa is also technical, perhaps more accessible, but we're seeing that ease of use and adoption is really big. Number 10, we're seeing design and development are merging and probably contributing to the demise of design tools like Bot Society. So design and development is really becoming one. There's no translation anymore between design and development. It's almost a continuous process. Number 11, really focus on improving training time of the NLU models. So, some companies like Rasa's got incremental training, Cognigy's got a quick build. IBM has really been focusing on speeding up their training time. So really a quick development, training and testing iteration, and training is really becoming short, the training of the NLU model. Number 12, irrelevance detection is receiving focus. IBM Watson Assistant comes to mind, and Human First. So you really want to be able to tell your user when they ask a question or when there's a certain intent that's really not part of the domain and it's really irrelevant. So instead of trying to service every single user utterance, let's focus on telling the user this is the domain of this conversational agent, and unfortunately that question falls outside of the domain. Number 13, negative patterns. This is really quite something that's hard to address. When someone said, I was trying to book a flight when I faced an issue, most bots will assume that the user wants to book a flight. So negative patterns are being addressed, and that's a vital part of conversation. Number 14, second last idea of traits. This is something Core AI introduced, and it's also an overarching idea, almost a layer that sits on top, so a very good implementation. And lastly, the use of languages. So the list of languages are growing. Quite a few minority languages are being catered for. One see this in Core AI, Cognigy, IBM, Rasa, the list goes on, right? So the languages are really being catered for. Multilingual chatbots are being implemented, and also universal languages are being implemented, where it's not a defined or a specific language that's being defined. And thank you so much for your attention. And that's in brief, 15 of the key points of convergence of the leaders. Thank you.